Hello, welcome to the 77th episode of Unifying Force. I'm Kat, joined by Dave and Gio. How is everybody?
Hey, doing fabulous. Having a big old time.
Good to. How are you guys doing?
All right. So today we're going to explore what would have happened if the Disney Renaissance never happened. This started because I stumbled across an article a couple weeks ago that was talking about how Down and Out in Beverly Hills was the first R-rated movie put out by Touchstone, and it was going into the whole track record of how Touchstone was putting out all these great movies. It was Disney's way of putting out not the most family-friendly films, or things that didn't fit their very Disney-fied brand and still making money on it, and how that all changed when the Little Mermaid came out, which I thought was funny because earlier Dave and I were talking about the Disney Renaissance and about the movies that were good. And so I thought it was funny that the way the article phrased it is the big punchline that what brought down all this glory from Touchstone? The Little Mermaid.
Yes, as it should. But yeah, I plugged this Thursday night on the watch along, is that we've done several what ifs, but our what ifs have just kind of been limited to the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars galaxy. What if Qui-Gon had lived, and this sort of thing. But this is a real world what if, and this really kind of would have real world ramifications for Star Wars and Marvel and the Disney parks. A lot of things that happen. But let's kind of do a little bit of background and stuff for everybody who may not be quite as familiar as with Disney as we tend to be. Is the Walt Disney Company has been putting out movies, animated movies, live action movies, and everything, for a very long time. And they have been divided. It's enough to where they're even Disney has eras, right? Like there are eras in the Disney films that they refer to, which is, the Golden Age, which is the classics, Snow White, up to Fantasia. And then you've got the Silver Age, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Sleeping Beauty, the Bronze Era. A lot of kid-centric films and stuff in there, and that's like kind of the 70s basically is the Bronze Era. And then a number of sites call the 80s of Disney the Dark Ages. Disney itself refers to it as the transitional period. But you look anywhere else and it's the Disney Dark Ages, which are what occurred right before the Disney Renaissance in the 90s. But this is animation. This is not necessarily what would have affected a Star Wars had Disney owned it at the time, because that's their live action. Their live action has gone kind of hand in hand with, but it rises and falls with the animations rise and fall. But that's, of course, their bread and butter, and that's what the Renaissance largely was animated films. So I think it's funny that how cyclical Disney's thing is. You don't really think of it this way, and some of the films that some places put online and say are not so popular Disney films, I think some of this is going to be jaded, and we'll have to talk about that in how it's retro and how people like it now as opposed to how it was received when it was released. Like one of the major ones that they're talking about that was in an era that was not so good, a darker period, is Walt Disney's Robin Hood. And I'm like, you bite your tongue, people who said that was not it. No, you're wrong. But so yeah, I mean, is from all the ages, but really the Disney Renaissance is officially those animated films between 1989, The Little Mermaid, and 1999. Where is that? what else is going on in Disney at that point? You know, the 80s had some stinkers in the animation that just stuff that, like the Rescuers Down Under. Okay, the Rescuers Under absolutely just, I think, tanked for them. Okay, so here it is. The Rescuers Down Under had a budget of $20 million. Okay, they spent $20 million doing the animation on this. It made $27.9 million in the global budget.
Global box office.
Yeah,
wow.
global. I think it's referred to as worldwide gross is what IMDb refers to it as. So it's like, and see, that's actually technically after the Renaissance was going on. That's a 1990 film.
Yeah.
Where they really say that the major downfall of it was in 1985's The Black Cauldron, because they put all in on The Black Cauldron. And while today I think we would look at that and go, well, it ain't so bad. Not really well received. But I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts on like the progression of Disney animation and stuff?
Well, it started going downhill in the 70s because they didn't have Walt anymore, and they couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. And then Don Bluth rounded up the best of the animators and left and started his own company.
Yeah.
And then they were still lost, and their movies weren't really coming together very well. And so Disney needed to find other ways to make money, and so that's when they created Touchstone Pictures, so they could start making a bunch of other films, good ones, things like Good Morning Vietnam or Flash, and all sorts of neat stuff that was making them a lot more bank, but they weren't being put out under the Disney label, which is something that doesn't really help them as far as their Disney brand. And we know the story, of course, of how the Renaissance came about, but it took quite a while to get there.
Well, yeah, is like I said, is they really put all in 85 in The Black Cauldron, and they went right to it. And it kind of strayed a little bit. It was I kind of liken it to like the Disney's Never-Ending Story or something like that, is that they were trying to put out something that wasn't, singing, dancing animals, which is, that's where Disney's really done well. But like I said, that it's cyclical in that Disney had gone down, their animation department had lost money and gone downhill before. Yes, the death of Walt, but before that, even Fantasia, which we regard as the absolute classic and gold standard of like Disney crazy storytelling stuff, is lost money.
Yeah,
that was it was not well received then. So they had problems, and when Walt left the company, is what did they do? They turned out a bunch of the same story over and over again, but that's what led to, I think the Renaissance harkens to The Little Mermaid, I think, and we all know at this point, because I've said it on air, that The Little Mermaid is probably my favorite Disney. It is my favorite Disney film, if not my favorite film of all time, just because of how much that it sucks you in, it sings you in. I am that person that if you're going to watch The Little Mermaid with me, we're not watching The Little Mermaid. We're singing, we're dancing, we're doing the choreography, we're doing the different parts. The harmony, that's what's going down. It's like,
Oh, so the sing-along version on Disney Plus was for you?
Yes, absolutely. But not necessarily. The sing-along version was for everybody else that has to watch that movie with me, because I'm not the one looking at the lyrics.
Yeah, you got them down. That's fair enough. The Disney Renaissance as you said, it's kind of bookended in that 10-year period, 11-year period between 88 and 99, with The Little Mermaid and Tarzan and the kind of 10 animated powerhouse Disney films that came out in that period. But yeah, it is interesting looking back at what happened to Disney animation in the kind of middle of the century to the 70s. And as Kat was saying, it seemed like for a while their best bet in terms of commercial investment and return would have been these don't want to say adult films, but non-family friendly, regular kind of animated things, more mature films that are, pitched at an older audience and not the all singing, all dancing kind of classic Disney with Mickey and Friends, and without really verging into the rebranding of famous fairy tales that the Disney Renaissance has done probably better than any studio on any type of screen and probably ever will. But it was interesting looking at and reminding myself about the split with Don Bluth and how he took 11 of the top Disney animators with him. And it seems quite easily that he did that, as if they were already a bit disaffected or weren't very interested in where Disney animation had been going at that point in the late 70s and early 80s. And then if you look at the films that his studio, and he had the great benefit of having Spielberg collaborate and produce with Amblin Entertainment to make some of their animated films. So The Secret of Nim, I think, was the first one, which is a much kind of darker, more gothic, magical adventure than what Disney's usually doing in that department with things like Fantasia and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And then they also spun out a couple of video games in the kind of fantasy era to show that they were, not just a single media company to make films. And Disney kind of was trying to fight back with things like Oliver and Company. While, Don Bluth Studios was able to come up with The Land Before Time in the same year. So that was 1988.
The Land Before Time just became a juggernaut of everything, destroying anything Disney could put against it.
Exactly. And this was actually, if I just take it chronologically back a little bit, the first time they both went head to head in the same year, calendar year, was 1986. So Disney had The Great Mouse Detective, which is a fun kind of adventure, but it went up against An American Tail, which to me that's several leagues difference. An American Tail is
Spielberg produced one, isn't it?
So that's when Amblin Entertainment and Spielberg came in with his kind of backing and budget behind it as well. And if you haven't seen An American Tail, it's an incredible film and it works really well standalone. There are things that come afterwards, but between An American Tail and The Great Mouse Detective from Disney, there's no real competition. And then 2 years later, Oliver and Company versus The Land Before Time. I reckon if you surveyed people between like 18 and 60 tomorrow and asked them they'd heard of which of those four films they'd heard of the most, I don't think many people would even know Oliver and Company exists. And I don't think many people would remember The Great Mouse Detective. But if they've been watching animated films for most of their life, they'll probably know An American Tail and definitely The Land Before Time. So it was at this period that Disney's biggest rivals were really eating into their share of the family-friendly animated story.
Well, I think the biggest thing of that period is where Bluth out-Disneyed Disney. Bluth made a movie that the vast majority of people believe is a Disney movie. Okay, can you guys think of what I'm talking about? Is I know a large number of people who believe that Anastasia is a Disney princess. Is like
I remember correcting people on that when I was a kid.
Not the best. I don't know that it's a great thing for Bluth, but it's a great thing for Bluth. Is like he had so captured the princess genre that they just naturally assumed that was a Disney film and not his. Now he's making all the money and laughing all the way to the bank, but like his press is like, oh, Disney did this great. No, that was not Disney. But yeah, that's your singing and your dancing and just Disney's not answering. That was even, I think, into the Renaissance that was, because what was
Yeah, that was Anastasia, but that was in the 90s. So Disney was already
1997.
So they were back, but Bluth took part of that away. Or maybe he didn't take part of that away because, people thought it was Disney, and it's just like, oh, we're going to go see the next Disney film because we loved Anastasia, and that has to be Disney.
Well, I know that a lot of the profits from Bluth's films probably had to go to pay off all the defaults because he had a lot of bombs that were not making money, like several in a row. So I imagine they had to clean it, because that's eventually led to his studio going under eventually, because they weren't around very long. I mean, it went for about 20 years or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, when you're talking about compared to Disney, that's not.
Yeah, that Anastasia film was budgeted at $53 million, made $140.
It's pretty good for an animated film back then.
Yeah. And like you hit the big ones. Here's the box office stuff of the Renaissance, okay? Is you get The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid was a budget of $40 million, okay? And it made a worldwide gross of $211.3 million. Yeah. Right out the bat there. And you go into, what's your other Renaissance film that you think is huge? Beauty and the Beast, right?
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast, giant Disney juggernaut. Budget of $25 million. Okay. I guess that they cheapened that out because that went to some of the CGI. A lot of that was done. Little Mermaid was hand animated and this and that. But so Beauty and the Beast, $425 million worldwide gross. Aladdin, budget of $28 million, made $504 million. It just builds that everyone's watching this. The Lion King, okay? They're like, it's been a couple of years, it's 2 years since we've had it. We're going to go all out. We're going to make this. This is what, James Earl Jones that we were talking about from before, and an amazing cast. They went up to and spent a budget of $45 million on this, almost doubling what they had been spending, made a worldwide gross of $987.5 million.
Yeah, and that comes with some of the re-releases as well. That's pretty good.
Yeah, not too bad.
Successful, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Let me look up Tarzan. I don't remember that one being a big hit. Maybe it was.
So Tarzan, I've got it right here in front of me. They budgeted, and I don't know why they lost their mind and did this. It's kind of like they lost their mind during Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Yeah.
Out of friggin' mind spending that much on it. There's no way it's going to make money. But they spent $130 million on Tarzan. Like, I don't know, 129 million of that was probably Phil Collins.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But they spent 130 million on that, and it made 448. But Disney at that point is like, oh, we only made $318 million after we made $900 million. That's not a failure. That's not a bad movie. That's a very different movie with the Phil Collins in the soundtrack. It's like,
I guess that's. Yes, after the studio gets their half, and after subtracting the budget, or after the theaters get their half and subtracting the budget, they got $94 million left over minus whatever they spent on marketing. So that didn't. Yeah, that's. And the animation didn't look too wildly different in that film for that amount of money. It's like,
no. I think they spent a lot on like the tree surfing instead of the swinging from the vines. It's like you got your CGI tree surfing and craziness. but so here's the thing and what we lost. Let's kind of get back around to the deal. Is I compare when I'm going, yeah, we got the Little Mermaid, but what we lost is more of the Big Mermaid. Because Touchstone, for me, one of Touchstone's flagship movies is Splash. Now, I think now it was at one point. Maybe it's not still, but on Disney Plus.
I think it might still be.
And they've gone back and forth with the partial nudity edited out. Because heaven forbid you have partial nudity on Disney Plus. They might have gone back on that now that they have freaking Deadpool on Disney Plus.
Yeah, that would be a weird double standard otherwise.
Right, exactly. They may have gone back to the original cut of Splash at that point. But that's what Touchstone was being touched on. You get,
and that was their first film.
Was that their first film?
Splash was their first film. Yeah. Wow. March 9th, 1984.
So Splash, it's ironic that, well, like Spencer always constantly says, is the mouse is incestuous and the mouse like hires the same people over and over again. You have Tom Hanks is the starring vehicle in that. I don't know that Daryl Hannah has Daryl Hannah done anything else for them. I'm not sure, but it was a great film. That was a great take on that. It's some of the.
Well, what's the other Disney thing that Tom Hanks did?
Toy Story.
Oh right, well that's Pixar, but yeah,
Pixar.
Disney didn't buy Pixar until I think 2006, so he'd already been Woody for a little while.
Yeah.
So that's more of a Pixar thing. But I'm looking at the other titles here. They got, Ruthless People, Tough Guys, The Color of Money. That was a good one. Pretty good official sequel for The Hustler. They got Tin Men. They got the old Ernest movies. They got Adventures in Babysitting, Three Men and a Baby, Good Morning Vietnam, Shoot to Kill, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's
arguably one of their most iconic films. That's excellent.
That one was, I think, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was as an answer to The Black Cauldron and to try and save the animation department. But the first in trying to save the animation department was going down kind of the Touchstone rabbit hole, which is making an edgier film because, the jokes and stuff in Roger Rabbit are not Disney Renaissance friendly. That's not Disney classic animation. And it was not a musical. You've got a Disney animated film that's not a musical.
And they did help Disney-fy it a little bit because the original story is a lot darker and more adult. Who censored Roger Rabbit?
Well, there you go.
Let's see. But yeah, there's they got Dead Poets Society.
Yeah.
Turner and Hooch. Let's see. In the 90s, they have things like Pretty Woman, Dick Tracy, Three Men and a Little Lady. What About Bob? That's a great comedy. Bill Murray. The Rocketeer.
Ooh,
that's a good one. Let's see. Father of the Bride, the ones with Steve Martin. Noise is Off. That's a good comedy. The Sister Act movies. Let's see. Captain Ron. Summer. Let's see. Yeah, they got a lot of. Oh, Nightmare Before Christmas. That was also Touchstone. That was gonna be Disney, and then they got cold feet because they thought the wackiness or the weirdness would be too dark for Disney kids. So they put Touchstone, and I'm sure they're still kicking themselves for that decision.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't put that out as what that was, and they, labeled it Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas when Tim Burton didn't have anything to do with the actual film. He just had the idea when he was indentured, let's say.
Right. He came up with the initial idea and then some of the characters, but other people wrote the story and the script. And for the 2 full years, 7 days a week that they were making that movie in San Francisco, Tim visited like 4 or 5 times for a grand total of 10 days only in that entire span. He was filming his other movies at that time. So it's really Henry Selick's Nightmare Before Christmas. But then that did well, and you have Ed Wood. That was another Touchstone from Tim Burton. Father of the Bride Part 2.
Starting to see some of the ones coming back in there.
Phenomenon.
You've got
Like
some
your Johnny Depp is back under the mouse with Pirates of the Caribbean. You're talking about
On Air, Face Off.
I was going to say
Air
like
Force
the big Jerry Bruckheimer action kind of
And
classics.
now around the mid 90s, you're starting to see them segueing to doing the international distribution rather than being the primary studio. Like Starship Troopers, international distribution, Air Force One, international, and then some lesser ones they still did themselves, like 6 Days, 7 Nights, Armageddon, The Patriot,
Yeah.
Holy Man, Rushmore. That was a what's his name? Wes Anderson's breakout film. 10 Things I Hate About You, Runaway Bride,
Classic.
Bringing It Dead, Bicentennial Man,
Robin
Less of a
Williams.
classic.
Shanghai Noon, Coyote Ugly. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? That's great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, Gangs of New York. It's another touchstone. Oh, wow.
That is a big giant.
Okay.
The Royal Tenenbaums, The Count of Monte Cristo.
So what year are we
Signs.
on now that
Yeah.
these are coming out? What year?
They've got some. So they've got
We're in the
early.
2000s now.
Yeah.
25th Hour.
Yeah. They've got the early M. Night Shyamalan films as well. When he
Yeah,
had his
they
magic
did.
touch.
Yeah. Cool Creek.
So
So yeah, they
that's
just
like
kind of let's see, the
Crimes
Alamo.
Unbreakable.
So they just Life Aquatic. So they kept doing that for a bit, and gradually the movies they're getting involved with have like several more production companies attached. Like they're getting a more smaller indie fare and just getting less and less involved as the studio's probably getting gradually downsized. Because as we know, the 2000s, once the Disney Renaissance ended, they had a few things like they had the Atlantis movie, like a couple other originals, but that was
Treasure
also
Planet.
when they had a lot of like direct to video crap. Because
let's make Aladdin 2, 3, and 4 and 46.
I'll tell you why that happened. The Return of Jafar was the first Aladdin sequel, first ever direct to video Disney sequel. It made something like $350 million in sales because it was the sequel to Aladdin and it was a video. And then they're like, oh my God, there's a gold mine. We don't have to put as much money in animation or story and we can make money. And that just started flooding the 2000s with all these bad sequels that nobody cared for because it was making money. And it wouldn't start up again until 2009 was like your next quasi-renaissance when you started getting back to form.
Well, my level of thinking here is like is you can make your Disney movie for kids, right? Yes.
Yep.
That's what those were. That's what those were making money is, oh, we've seen Aladdin. My kid loves Aladdin. I'm going to watch, Aladdin 2. And then the parents lose their mess and can't bear to sit through that, and so it's not as popular going back. The kids, yeah, they'll buy it, and it's like, oh, we're gonna make a dumbed down, ridiculous story. But the greats have something for the adults. Have it. It's like my mind, the classic Warner Brothers animation always, which is, yeah, it's animated, slapsticky, this and that, Bugs Bunny, blowing up, but you've got more of that the adults can stand to sit through. It's not like having to watch Coco Melon for crying out loud. But yeah, it's like, but the Little Mermaid, it's got that. The Beauty and the Beast has that same kind of thing. It's the visual beauty. The songs are insanely catchy. But again, Touchstone stuff could have been better, bigger, and they could have kept going with that with the live action. Is quotable movie lines. You said "Good Morning Vietnam" was that. I mean, hello, that. And then, but of course, that's your Robin Williams. Robin Williams is the genie, makes Aladdin what Aladdin is, and he makes. It's both. So there's your the mouse using back and forth. It's like, oh, we got Robin Williams over here. Let's have Robin Williams go over here. But so if this Renaissance hadn't happened, do we get Disney buying Lucas? Do we get their commitment to these other studios? Do we get Disney buying Marvel? Discuss.
Well, Iger's the one who went on the aggressive buying spree.
But so is it because I don't know if they had kept going the way of the Black Cauldron, would they have had the money to buy that? Because I mean, the Touchstones films made money, but they didn't make this kind of like they didn't make like freaking Lion King money.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, their most profitable worldwide box office gross was Armageddon in 1998. That was Touchstone's highest grossing film, and that made 553 million, which is a lot. But you compare that to Aladdin being number one,
or is that what it like? What did it cost to make Armageddon? Because that was a big spectacle kind of thing.
I'd imagine it would have been north of $120 million.
Let's see.
I can just 140 million. Wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
Which is incredible amount. It might have been one of the most expensive films ever made, actually, in 1998. But then once we get to the 2000s and mid 2000s, definitely, budgets seem to be for blockbusters about that quite frequently.
Oh yeah, budgets just got stupid.
And then with the avalanche of CG and multiple partners and producers around the world being catered for and producing so many different parts of films, especially the MCU films, the Star Warses, you've got budgets swelling to 200 million plus, which is crazy money.
Yeah. Well, and then that's not counting things like, again, we saw with Dial of Destiny that we've talked about before, is then you double the budget of what it took to make the movie on press for the movie? Advertising?
Well, they spent $393, I think, on just the production budget, and then what, $100 on the marketing, wasn't it? Or something. So they roughly had a near $500 million investment. So what the hell are you doing? You know?
Right.
Oh, no, 200. No, never mind. It was $293 million budget, and then $102 million for marketing.
Yeah, like
it's
nearly like, you know.
So nearly $400 million investment overall, and it's like you're not making. It's like the same uphill battle you had to climb in 2008 with the fourth one is going to be even massive, bigger than for the new ones. Like no.
Yeah.
So the balance was minus 3 million on the Dial of Destiny overall budget versus box office return.
And again, did you really need to put out press and advertising for freaking Indiana Jones? I think the name, we're making an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
The people that are going to go see it are going to go see it.
I think it was ineffective as well. I felt like I didn't see much of it, and I'm fully into the whole Lucasfilm and Disney everything. So I didn't feel like I'd seen as much of it just being online, and online is how everyone markets everything nowadays. And if it's not, if I don't feel like I'm getting bombarded by it, then I don't know who outside of, again, as you say, already firm fans of Indiana Jones would be seeing the stuff. But maybe that's something Disney has to look at, manipulating the algorithms a bit more to widen the net.
Possibly, or that we didn't see it because they're marketing it to the normies who aren't necessarily going to go see it anyway.
Potentially, yeah. That definitely could have been a decision. So overall, estimated losses are $143 million on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Whew.
Yeah.
And that's just the Lucasfilm side of Disney doing that. And then they made another dumb decision with their budgeting recently, and it's like, and they lose even more money. And I don't know why are we getting back to doing stupid budgets? Especially like last year, we saw Creator made for 80 million, Godzilla Minus One made for like 15 million. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
It generally has been the kind of indie thing that just takes off, that you make it on a shoestring with a really good story. You were talking about earlier is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yep, it made for $125,000. Art director says it probably should have cost half that, but everybody varies as to how much it made because the mob is absconded with the money. But it was, some sources say 30 million. The people involved in the movie thought it made like 100, but it was, I'd imagine it would be closer maybe in the 30 million range when you consider that you didn't have big cineplexes back then, and playing at drive-ins in that type of movie maybe. But yeah, it's still an insane turnaround on your money, on your finances for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you get is craziness of money and having story drive it instead of budget and character in this. But here's here's my next question with it. Okay, so maybe the Renaissance doesn't happen. Disney still, they want to go out, they want to buy things, they want to get more stuff coming into their studio to kind of save the movie end of their studio. They still want Star Wars. Would Star Wars look like it looks today? We've talked about many times on the show, like the studio interference, and it's Disney, and Disney wants it to be this and wants the message to be that. Would Disney's Star Wars be Disney's Star Wars if it was touched on?
No.
Yeah.
Probably
It'd be
not.
probably a lot grittier,
Mm-hmm.
a lot better. Because they haven't really been emphasizing story and character as much, with the exception of things like Andor.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it'd be very different if it was touched on.
I think there'd be a lot more variety in the type and kind of genre of film you get as well.
I think the same kind of thing can be said for Marvel. Is you get a lot more of, we might get what we talked about on some of our other shows with our spooky season shows or different genres of Star Wars film. Would we get the Star Wars horror movie? Totally breaking those things out into another one. Maybe some of it could be the same. Is we've talked about one of the best of the Disney Star Wars films is Rogue One. And Rogue One, who is the director of Rogue One? It's a complicated question, but who is one of the credited directors?
Gareth Edwards and Tony Gilroy.
Who is
Yeah,
one of the
backslash
credited
there.
directors of Rogue One? That would be Ron Howard, who was the director of Splash.
They brought Ron Howard in on Rogue One as well.
I thought so. I thought maybe I'm wrong.
He probably consulted. It feels like there were so many hands involved in that.
Because I know they brought in Gilroy to rewrite and direct the third act. And that's why Gilroy they're helming Andor.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, as we mentioned before a few times, thankfully kind of separate and in isolation from the other Star Wars projects.
Backwards me. No, is I was talking about Ron Howard, and I said the wrong name and was thinking the thing in my head the entire time. It was, of course, Solo.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. No, but again, I liked Solo. I know other people didn't like Solo. Rogue One would be the best, I think, of them. But Solo was a good story that didn't get the break that it got because of stupid bombing or whatever. Review bomb.
Yeah.
No, it didn't do it.
Yeah.
They shot
really
themselves
bad
in that
marketing.
before then.
But I mean, I enjoyed that kind of take on it, and it could have been a more of a touchstone kind of thing. But again, maybe the Disney influence and nope, we got to change this. We got to make this for the studio. This has to be a Disney film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a really hard one to answer, obviously, because we're just dealing in total hypotheticals. But it's interesting when you look at a list of all the things Disney's acquired. I mean, started off in 1923, so they're now 101 years old, and they didn't really do any big acquisitions until the middle 20th century. So I'm not quite sure how they managed this, but I think Walt would have created a separate company for Disneyland, incorporated that, and then acquired it, because it comes first on the listings of acquisitions by Disney overall. So that was 1957, and it was for $562,000. And then if we just skip forward quite a bit, and then the next big acquisition, and it starts to really pop off in the 90s. It's a bit of an unseemly one given the connection to who produced all the films, but Miramax Films in 1993, and that was 60 million, acquired by the Walt Disney Studios. They'd actually created that kind of subdivision of the company. And then through the 90s, they're picking up kind of small channel type things. They bought Fox Family Worldwide in 2001, and that included Saban Entertainment, and the company that owned Fox Kids, Jetix, had a lot of the after-school animated and live programming stuff.
So Disney owns Power Rangers now?
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's my first association when I hear that name, Saban, as well. And with that, they also got ABC, Family Worldwide distribution. So all the kind of sitcoms you can imagine from that. Then we get to the really huge stuff. It's the Muppets, officially acquired in February 2004 for 75 million. And then we get into a little bit of gaming with Avalanche Software and Living Mobile, as they, I guess, started to see how lucrative video games were going to become. And then, as Kat said, Pixar in May 2006. That was for the very, very small amount of $7.4 billion.
Yeah, well,
which-
Pixar has been backed, Pixar was like backed, and Apple's involved in that, and the whole
Yeah.
there.
It originally spun out by George Lucas as well, way back as the technology started with ILM connected. And then, they acquired a lot of smaller stuff. The other gigantic one then is Marvel at the end of 2009, December. The whole of Marvel Entertainment, which was $4.4 billion.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, Paramount had produced and distributed the first Iron Man film. So that was a huge, obviously now with hindsight, it's easy to say a no-brainer for Disney, but I mean, 4.4 billion is still quite a risk given that Marvel didn't have a consistent film IP sort of franchise thing going forward. Going forward, it did afterwards, but the MCU hadn't really become a thing people knew about. There was talk on trying to connect other kind of B-side Marvel characters because Iron Man's not, an X-Men or Spider-Man type popular character. But yeah, this was the major acquisition era for Disney, which you could say was catapulted by
I think it's got to be fueled
the
by
Renaissance.
the made in the Renaissance, because they were not making money, the animation side at least, before that, and they were going out and at least under Touchstone. But now this is Disney, and everything's bringing into there. Is Marvel is Disney, Star Wars is Disney. Is they're not making them touchdowns. Think about the vast landscape of the Disney parks and how it's going to be different without the Renaissance. Because Disney World, okay, right here, right now, you have your Little Mermaid ride in New Fantasyland. You have Beauty and the Beast Castle, Be Our Guest. You have that. You have Enchanted Tales with Belle. You've got what after the Renaissance, but kind of a product of it that the princess is moving forward. That is Splash Mountain rethemed as Tiana's. It's all these sort of things. As you go to Disneyland and Finding Nemo, you'd still have 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And things, I don't know. You've got to argue whether things are a product of the Renaissance or whether they would have come anyway. With Pirates of the Caribbean, that's a huge chunk of That one's hard to argue. I can't really argue that one because that's a movie that was from a ride, but they just made it into a huge thing. And but yeah, the footprint of the Renaissance on the parks, all of these IPs are what they're building on, and the things that they bought from it is the entire Muppet section. We have Galaxy's Edge. What was Tron? Was Tron Touchstone?
No, it was before then.
That was before that. Okay. Oh yeah, because it was 82, and you said 84.
84.
Splash was the first Touchstone.
Yeah.
But just a gigantically different landscape. And the question is, better, worse, not? I don't know.
Well, they would have been leaning a lot more into Touchstone had the Renaissance not happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have eventually had a Renaissance at some time, or if Lucas would have sold to Disney. Even though I still think that Lucas shouldn't have sold to anybody, he should have just appointed somebody as his new successor,
Yes.
and left. It's the same thing that always happens with these companies. Oh, I'm going to retire now, so I'm just going to sell the whole company. It's like, no, it's a bad idea. It's like
Right.
Pixar was doing fine. Why did Pixar feel the need to sell to Disney? It's like, I don't know. Marvel, I could see why. They were kind of
Marvel was
having to worry about making a deal back and forth for how they were going to get their movies distributed and financed. So that made sense, especially since Marvel was on the verge of complete bankruptcy even in 97, which is why they sold the Spider-Man rights to Sony for next to nothing. They needed money. So that Marvel acquisition makes sense for $4.4 billion. That's a really good deal. Because the other thing they're making money off of, aside from the movies from the Renaissance, is all the merchandising associated with characters and stuff from the Renaissance films. And even the parks were suffering around that time because Disney's brand was, not that great. And so they started infusing all that Renaissance stuff into the parks. And then they brought George Lucas back to collaborate on another attraction, which they did for Indiana Jones Adventure, which helped kick up attendance because they invented some new technology that they could share with the other parks. And
they did the same thing again when they kicked it up with Star Tours.
They did, yeah. He brought that to them before then in '87, and they worked on that. And
Yeah.
I think he was involved with Captain EO. I can't remember if he had.
Captain EO.
That was before then. I think Coppola was involved with that too. And then, so yeah, it'd be a very different type of situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Disneyland and Disney World without I don't even know that you get as much of the IP infusion that there is currently going on without the success of the Renaissance IPs. It's like, yeah, we brought in a Little Mermaid ride. People love it. Boom, go ahead. We brought in, the Beauty and the Beast dining, and people love it. Let's go in. The Beauty and the Beast show at Hollywood Studios is let's find more places to interject IP. Is that's how it keeps going. Original attractions weren't based on Disney IPs. Okay. Mm-hmm. Pirates of the Caribbean, like I was, thinking of, but unsuccessfully arguing before, that was an original creation for the park before it was the movie franchise. Again, the Jungle Cruise not started with, like, in 20 years, when kids come up to me and go, yeah, I loved riding that Jungle Cruise ride because I love the movie with The Rock, I'm going to slap them. It would be the old man beating someone with their cane because they're like, yeah, I rode the ride because I love the movie. No, damn it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. That's what the level of exposure. But even newer stuff now is infuse IP. Moana has the splash thing in Epcot. IP is seeping its way into Epcot. Nemo and friends in the seas. Is why couldn't it just be the seas? Why can't it just be the community of the future? It's like, nope, we're going to throw this in. Nope, this is coming in. We have an entire Toy Story land from their acquisition of Pixar. Let's acquire something. Let's make it a land. Star Wars, Pixar. India is about to get, a bigger presence on this coast and the East Coast when they redo Dinosaur.
What's that going to become? Do we?
So
know?
Dinosaur, the ride now in Animal Kingdom, is the exact same ride vehicle as Indiana Jones at Disneyland. So
Okay.
I don't know that has it been officially said, but I think Dino Land is becoming Central America. And so all of the dinosaur stuff is being rethemed at Animal Kingdom. Again, I don't know if it has been officially said or just completely and totally assumed. What would fit in Central America would be an Indiana Jones ride. So you got the same ride vehicle. Let's bring in a story from what you have in California and call it good.
Mm-hmm.
And they did shut down they did close down the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular because I think they're going to move that into the new Indy Land or whatever.
Yeah, that is a sad thing to get that gone, but it was kind of an island unto itself again. It's kind of, we just had the Stunt Spectacular here. They closed down the Indiana Jones gift shop even that was next to it. And it just got to be a really intense kind of show to schedule it. And then just like Star Tours being of its own self outside of Galaxy's Edge is a weirdness, but I don't know that there's any way you can move one.
They can't. It's too much money, and the logistics, it doesn't make sense. Just leave it there. Plus, they got that whole thing designed with the gift shop right there. Everything's just like they'd have to replace it with something because there's not much else in Tomorrowland anymore. Just the Space Mountain, Astro Blasters, and then some. I think that rocket thing still goes, a little rocket ride.
But see, I'm talking about something completely different because here, Star Tours and Galaxy's Edge are not in Magic Kingdom. Star Tours is over next to Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular outside. And, you've got like Muppets.
In Hollywood Studios.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's an even different kind of thing. Yeah. Moving it, I think at Disneyland would be an even bigger ordeal than incorporating it in Hollywood Studios. In Hollywood Studios, probably what you would end up doing is not moving Star Tours, but leaving Star Tours where it is and expanding Galaxy's Edge to meet it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So, Kat, you had the premise. Okay, we're getting to the point where it's about like to wrap it up. Did my favorite movie of all time destroy Disney? Did the Disney Renaissance kill it? Is that the real assumption? I mean,
did the Disney Renaissance kill Disney? Is that what you're asking?
No. Did the Disney Renaissance kill completely the direction that Disney was going, that would have made Disney a different Disney? Did it bring it back to the classic? Did it?
Yeah, it did. Because Touchstone became, again, more associated with being co-producers on other movies and international distribution. It didn't have as much hands-on involvement. And Disney was still getting a little money from that, but because the Renaissance took off and became so successful with the box office and the merchandising and all that, they didn't need to focus as much on Touchstone. And so they kind of let that slowly and gradually peter out. Be able to figure out how we'll just put in a little bit of here to get some percentage points back and, low risk investments. And it kind of ended there.
Gio?
Well, I think it did take a different direction with the Renaissance. It kind of kicked it into a higher gear in terms of kind of classic Disney. which they had not found before that. I would say the quality of storytelling and animation and overall content product from The Little Mermaid onwards was unlike anything anyone had made around the world, let alone just compared to older Disney when Walt and Roy were in charge. I definitely don't think it killed Disney by kind of winding down with Touchstone and focusing more on their family-friendly aesthetic and brand. I just think we're on a parallel route. So that's why the what if is interesting, because it's like it's a branching off that I don't think would have been as profitable for Disney as the animated revival was with the Renaissance in the 1990s. And I think they're probably better commercially and in terms of revenue and profit as a company with what happened. Because if you look at it like this, a lot of people wouldn't have any idea that Disney has any kind of vines or tendrils involved in the films that we've mentioned that were Touchstone features. So even if you don't look at the pure raw data, the numbers in terms of box office returns, Touchstone films versus Disney Renaissance 1989 to 1999 films, I think it's been a lot better for Disney overall to have gone the route that we got. But it does feel like we missed out on potentially some more interesting alternative stories, as I said before, less diversity in film and genre being made. But it's hard to say if Disney still would have gone forward with the major IP acquisitions with the Muppets, with Pixar, with Marvel, with Lucasfilm, and with 20th Century Fox, which is the biggest one of all. We haven't really talked too much about it because it's almost so fresh. But since it kind of went through in 2019, that was I think the second largest ever media acquisition in the history of entertainment, which initially was around 50 billion, but then ended up becoming 71.3 billion after the bidding war with Comcast. I don't think these kind of things would have happened. I don't think we can say for sure either way, which I know makes it sound like I'm sitting on the fence. But I think the Disney Renaissance was the initial snowball momentum that just continued down this track of IP acquisitions that we've talked through and has brought us to where we are today.
So I'm hoping, here's my take, is I absolutely love the Disney Renaissance and all of the films in it. Is, I think going to that classic format of the Disney sing-along and the musical is what helped it. Is, even during the Renaissance, but something that like was started before it is, like I said, the Rescuers Down Under, not as much of the classic Disney format. There was a DuckTales movie in there at that point. And DuckTales and those sort of things, that's the Disney afternoon. That's a whole other thing. And that's a whole other show that we can talk about. But making that as an animated movie that's not it didn't work, I think
that was another thing. Yeah, they did a lot of animated TV shows in the 90s as well. That they did one on Aladdin, on The Little Mermaid, and they had Tailspin.
They had Hercules. They had The Lion King. Yeah.
That's for another show. Okay, we're not a can of worms, because I can talk to Disney Afternoon forever. They've got all of sort of things. But yeah, I mean, I love it, but I think I would have liked I liked a lot of the films and the other thing as well. In Touchstone, the more serious, the more gritty. I would have loved to see it grow into its own thing, and Disney even almost like split the companies and let it have a life of its own and grow and flourish, instead of pulling back, away from it, that and just, oh no, we're going to go family friendly and family friendly only, and that's what it's going to do. And that's some of, I guess, what they did with even in the 90s, we can talk about 90s TV is when they acquired, ABC and the popularity of Full House and Family Matters and that sort of thing too. Did that become a part of Disney, or did Disney want them because of that? That's another argument. But I love where they want. I love the parks. I love the IPs in the parks, even though I do long for. I wish we still had 20,000 Leagues as opposed to Finding Me. But so let me ask this last question for this while we wrap up. If the Renaissance was so powerful and so amazing, and all of these original stories are what they've done, why aren't we having a re-Renaissance with them going back to those stories and trying to pull those things into live action? And why are those just tanking and not doing what they do?
Because they're lifeless, soulless remakes. They don't have the same. It's like a lot of a lot of what made those films work was that not only were they animated literally, but figuratively. And some things don't translate as well to live action. It's not going to have the same sense of whimsy. Like I remember watching Beauty and the Beast, and it's like, this should be easy, but I'm watching it, and it's like, this feels like a very lifeless imitation. It's like, yeah, a couple of characters are good, but for the most part, I'm just not feeling anything. The Lion King 2019 was, again, they're trying to make it look so real that it's like saturated of all color and liveliness. It's like, what? This doesn't feel like the Lion King, and again, it's laziness. We're going to remake everything, so let's do the live action version where it's like, your Disney animation studio is still doing some interesting things, like Raya and the Last Dragon, Moana, and they got the Moana sequel coming out.
Yeah.
So if they could look at the end when they did Ralph Breaks the Internet, that was Disney, or Wreck-It Ralph, I should say, and then that sequel. So to get to doing things like that some more, rather than, I know these live action movies make a lot, and while I haven't seen it, I've heard the one that has the best reviews is Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella from 2015. They said that was pretty good.
I enjoyed that. I saw that one in theaters.
I did too.
I did not enjoy the live action Little Mermaid. It was like it lost a lot of the magic. They changed out and let's try and put another song in, but I don't know. The magic was just not there. It was like watching the animated Little Mermaid 2 Back to the Sea. It's like, damn it. I
remember the big story coming out of that. Everybody's like, man, the king must have been getting busy around all the 7 seas because he's got kids from all corners of the world. That was funny. But that didn't do much for me. A lot of these, when they keep announcing they're going to do live action remakes, do we have to keep doing this? And now they got Snow White coming out next year.
Yeah, they do.
Where it's like, let's make the dwarves, just look like CGI versions of the same dwarves from 1937. It's like, why are we doing this live action at all? It's like, what are you doing? It's like, well, that's right. It's because we had that photo leaked of Snow White and the 7 beatniks, and people are like, what the hell is this? And so then they panicked, and it's like, you could hire like actual, actors who actually look the part to play the roles.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's too controversial for Disney.
Well, that's the level of thing it's we're gonna do this, we're gonna put it out, but that's bring me the other one is why Mulan didn't do what the original Mulan is. You took out the little singing, dancing, smartass dragon, and you tried
the heart and soul of the film. Yeah,
I know. It's why would you take out that? And has done.
They should have just called it an adjacent story.
You could have totally gotten Eddie Murphy back for that.
Easily.
But making it more of it just didn't work. I saw what you were trying to do. I also think you did a huge disservice in both of those films to not give Jodie Benson and Ming-Na Wen a larger part in the story. Cameo, great. What? Jodie Benson's was just horrible. It's like, random lady at the bazaar. No, Ming-Na Wen at least was somebody, but just on screen for like that much. But anyway,
I would have added my caveat to everything positive that I said with the direction Disney went with the Renaissance was the awful situation of these, as Kat said, heartless, soulless, empty husks of live action remakes that we've been getting and they've been churning out because they're awful. I would say it's easy to point to the ones that are decent and above average for me, and that would be Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella, 2015. That would be Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book, because they both add a lot to the story and to the characters. They're not shot for shot, scene for scene, live action versions of what we've just seen in the best way possible through Disney's magical and imaginative drawn animation. And I really liked Aladdin in 2019. I thought it was very different, kind of marching to its own beat compared to the original, and it was stronger for it. So if
it was surprising because I went into that movie wanting to hate it, and I'm like,
yeah,
you can't replace Robin Williams.
Yeah, exactly.
And they didn't necessarily try to do that. They let Will Smith be his own genie and not try and puppet Robin Williams, which is impossible.
Yeah.
So I didn't love, and that's not my favorite of them, but I really went into that movie trying to hate it and couldn't.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. But I felt like everything ahead of the release did make it seem like it was going to be its own thing, and not Disney's Aladdin version 2, but Disney's Aladdin completely reinterpreted. The only thing I would say is Jafar. I don't feel the casting was right. He didn't seem scheming and sinister, and the guy looked too young and almost too similar to Aladdin.
Yeah.
He could have been classmates with Aladdin.
Well, that's something else that they do a lot in these live action remakes. They add a twist with a villain that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like he tries to connect with Aladdin saying, I was a street rat like you once. And it's like, okay, I get why you make him younger, because in the cartoon, if you have somebody who's already that old, who's that cartoonishly conniving, you're going to be suspicious. Like, hey, this guy's out to get me. Whereas if he's younger, you think, okay, he's ambitious. He wants to move up the ladder, whatever. But yeah, he didn't seem intimidating at all. It's like, it didn't work. And most of the performances of that movie to me felt like a Disney on Ice performance. Like everything was a bit over the top, except for, ironically, Will Smith and the actress playing the Jasmine's maid that the genie likes. Like those two, I thought worked. Yeah. But the rest, and then the actor, I can't remember his name. The guy that got to play the Sultan is actually he's a comedian. He's really funny. He's really energetic and enthusiastic. But they had him play this super dour, serious Sultan, like completely devoid. It's like, come on, let this guy be himself, But I guess that works because it's not exactly, it's not a shot-for-shot remake either. It's a little different.
Yeah,
exactly. It had its own. It stood on its own as an individual film. I think you could enjoy it enough if you somehow not ever seen Disney's original Aladdin. I think it did enough on its own and was still imaginative. I'd say it does have a cinematography problem though, because I did feel like at times certain scenes in 2019 Aladdin did feel like they were a stage show, and the production looked very small, and the camera seemed very close to everybody. There weren't many like panned shots or, get to seeing Agrabah. It felt quite small. But yeah, I'd still say that when you take swings, you're going to miss, but at least you're taking swings. And we don't want to just see the same kind of batting motion over and over again. So yeah, the only glaring weakness for me for the Disney Renaissance is the fact that we're stuck in this kind of shallow loop of remakes, which they hopefully break out of soon.
Well, that I think is my closing, and what I would like to say to Disney, not that they're watching this, but sometimes it seems to be that ideas that we have are had by other people that eventually work their way into something at some point. It's about darn time we had another one. We need another Disney Renaissance. Okay, because so many of the things that they've done, even the Marvel this and the Marvel that, it is so on the downturn. Get us something original, some original ideas, bring it back to that bold thing. I mean, they said, I think when the Little Mermaid was made, they had been thinking about doing an adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen for 40 or 50 years before that. Is go back to the drawing boards or something, or look at a like one of Roy Disney's notebooks or something somewhere, and find a little thought about idea that you didn't do that was original or based on something that you haven't done 14 times. Find another Grimm's fairy tale or something that you can brighten up and cheer up and make it a new Disney thing, instead of it's Disney, let's do the same Disney thing, let's do the same Disney thing, let's do the same Disney thing, let's do the same Star Wars thing, let's do the same Star Wars thing. Give us something. The stuff that's working the best, the stuff that we like the best, and or some of the best stuff out there, and that's the total departure.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's it. I think thank you guys for watching. If you've got comments, always, we're not doing this live anymore, but put them in there. Give us ideas for future shows. This entire show here just came from something that I had mentioned in an episode a couple episodes ago, and Kat went out and found a little article, and we roll on. So until next time, may the Force be with you.
Thanks a lot. May the Force be with you all.